pandemic in the beautiful summer of Central Virginia, you're going to rally the troops together. And you have.
I have, but I also have many friends that have jumped in to plan things and, try to get groups together. It's hard to have one event with many, many, many people. So we're spreading it out a little bit.
What was the very long restaurant dining room table I saw?
So that's the back room at Tavola.
Okay, very nice.
So we had...
only the best for Quentin Beckham.
We had 8 of us there, and
I saw Bert in the photo.
Bert was there, Elena, Mark and Ames, friends of mine, Drew and Bree, and then Sarah and Jared.
Very, very nice. Very nice. So if you want to wish Quentin Beckham some birthday love, put it in the feed. We're going to talk some macro indicators with the economy and perhaps how they pertain to Charlottesville and Central Virginia. The jobs report was out this morning. And as my bullish friend Quentin Beckham alluded to in our pre-production meeting, not a bad number, QB.
It's not a bad number, but before we go to that, I want to talk about or reminisce about Tuesday's show, because that was pretty awesome.
That was amazing. It was the longest show we've ever done in Real Talk history.
That's
much
amazing.
to the chagrin of Keith Smith, who I think is watching right now.
Hi, Keith, if you're watching.
QB's got the record right now, Keith Smith.
It went by very quickly.
Didn't it? Yeah.
They were also just very exciting to talk to, and I hope that sort of the point of it, I hope that people feel like they have options that maybe they didn't realize they had before.
I think they did. And I'll give you a little secret here. I was so impressed by your guests, and we'll turn the cameras on and start the program in moments. I was so impressed by one of your guests, or both your guests. They were both amazing, absolutely amazing. They were dynamic businesswomen. But I invited Deandra back because I needed to talk to her. I
don't
loved
doubt
her.
I don't doubt it.
That was one of the best we have ever done, and the host very much enjoyed it. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll when you're ready, baby. Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate, life, and the pursuit of happiness, presented by the Yes Realty Partners and Yes Team Realtors. Guys, it is Friday morning and a beautiful day to be alive in Central Virginia. We have our very, very, very good friend as the guest host for, unfortunately, the last time for a little while. And I sincerely and genuinely mean what I just said. I very much enjoy this guy's perspective, his zest for life, his mischievous nature, which I also embody. I enjoy his mischievous nature. And I think without further ado, let's welcome him, Quentin Beckham, to the show. I'd say you have a mischievous nature.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm pretty low-key.
Come on, should we ask Elena and Bert that question?
Oh, they're not awake yet.
No, they're not awake yet. They're restaurant owners.
I'm teasing.
How are you, and happy birthday?
I'm doing really good. Yeah, birthday. This is such a different birthday than a year ago.
Put that in perspective.
This time last year, we were really shut down. Like, people were sitting at home, staying at home. We were watching numbers and craving a vaccine and getting aid out to people, and people that had to sell homes because they had lost jobs, and it was a whole different world. And it's just curious to me, like, we're coming out of this now. It's curious to see the things that are changing. Are they going back to where they were? Are they going to something new? And some of the stuff that hasn't changed yet. And so that's a really interesting thing. And Tuesday's show, what I really enjoyed about Tuesday's show, other than the fact that those are just two lovely women that are great examples of people just taking the reins of their life and choosing what they want to do for themselves and going for it. One of the things that sort of leads to today as we talk about jobs report and how people are working is you got some good examples of people that are not in traditional jobs. They're found their own way to make money for their own goals while still doing things they enjoy and out there in a world that doesn't really have a ton of traditional jobs that people might want to go into.
Quentin Beckham, you get more comfortable in this setting. The more you do it, you're very, very good as a broadcaster. I want to emphasize that. Neil Williamson has given you some love. Carol Thorpe, Johnny Ornalis. Neil, we love you. On the show, I believe you're coming on next week from the Free Enterprise Forum. If you want to wish Quentin Beckham a happy birthday, put it in the feed. I will relay it on air. I see your Keller Williams team is doing that. Did they do anything tricky to celebrate El Presidente's birthday, excuse me?
Nothing tricky yet, but let's not give them ideas. We don't have to promote this. Yeah.
We could do something tricky for QB. All right, my friend, where do you want to start? Do we want to reflect on then and now to begin with?
I am sort of curious about the then and now. You know, we're going through the process of reopening the association. We're going through the process of reopening the brokerage, closing companies, property management companies, and it's an interesting process as we come out. I think a lot of things feed into this, and this attachment to jobs and wages is going to affect the housing market. So you look at how unemployment rates have happened, and yes, we've gained back a lot, but we're not back. You still have the demographic difference between who's back more and who's not back quite so much. And all of these folks sit in a price point where we have a hard time finding them a house. And I'm curious, because as you go through and you look at the ways people are employed and the goals that they have, home ownership still being 90% of, forgive me, the millennial generation, you know how I hate that label. That generation, 90% of them want a home. Many of them are now deciding what kind of job do they want to have? Is it even in the same industry? And how do they want to work? And it's for somebody in my age bracket where there were fun offices and there were less fun offices, but there was always an office. And now even that is sort of up in the air for a great many people.
Would you say the lack of better phrase, the millennial demo, seems to have their pick from a job standpoint right now?
You know, I doubt they would tell you that.
Really? Okay.
I doubt they would tell you that, because if you think of it as, picking fresh fruit, you got to want the fruit.
Okay. I'm with you on this metaphor.
So, show me a large bin of really fresh, cheaply priced Brussels sprouts. I don't want one. I think they're the devil's testicles. No matter how you fix them, they taste bad.
Devil's testicles, Judah.
I'm completely uninterested. And so I am curious from this generation and this piece of the workforce that is a huge piece of our workforce, what's the fruit they're looking for, and do we actually have a supply, and how are we going to make that better as business owners, as employers, as larger companies?
Well, give us the tidbit you threw about the job fair in our pre-production meeting.
So, I have a series of things that I read every morning, and one of the interesting anecdotes, and I can't remember what state this was in, but it was a CEO commenting to a news reporter on how 60 companies had come together. They were holding a day-long job fair with 500 jobs to fill, and they had 4 people show up. So, yes, the pick of 500 jobs, but we spread out a buffet that nobody wanted.
But is it that? Do you think it's that? So you're a positive guy. So you're basically giving the benefit of the doubt, and you're basically giving the benefit of the doubt for the folks that are basically saying this is a job that we don't want. Is it that, or is it folks choosing to game the system?
I think it's a lot of things, but what is it mostly? If you want to really get to the heart of a problem, look at what it is mostly. And it's not mostly people wanting to stay on unemployment. It's not mostly people deciding stocking a grocery shelf or working at Lowe's is beneath them. It's got to be something else. And I'm sure there's somebody that until stimulus runs out and their unemployment check reduces in money, it makes really good financial sense for them to keep doing this. And I don't know that I can fault them for that decision. That a lot of them are in a place where they need to sock this money away because they don't know what's ahead any more than the rest of us do. So can't really fault them for that. You have a component where childcare is still an issue. And so you can't have a Monday through Friday job where you're gone and it's not a place where you can bring your child along. So there's still that. And then I think you have others that have just realized the whole point of Tuesday's show was to sort of paint a picture for people to realize that you probably have choices you didn't think you had if you're willing to grit your teeth, work a little bit harder, learn some things you didn't know the first time around, and make a couple mistakes.
What do you do? What do you say? What's the conversation? Because many of them are your friends. Restaurant owners, let's go down this road. A lot of my friends too. They cannot hire at the clip they need to hire to run the restaurants the way they did before COVID. And maybe the key words there is before COVID. Is the mindset now changing for the restaurant owner to figure out how to run a more lean, less populated staff?
Well, I think a couple things happened at once. One, today is the 4th. We were expecting, at least all business owners, small businesses especially, we were expecting a whole nother week before all the restrictions were lifted. And so that came faster. Also, if you look at the economic reports that are out in the jobs report today, the amount of consumerism that just appeared out of thin air is something nobody was ready for.
Consumer, he means people spending money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
disposable income.
But we anticipated that, right?
I don't think, we anticipated the steady acceleration. We didn't anticipate the jet at full speed. And so a lot of the service industry businesses, a lot of businesses for goods that you're actually in-person shopping got pounded, and they were still ramping up.
Right.
And so they were doing their best. I mean, no fault. They've been doing their best. Their timeline got cut shorter than they thought they had. We all knew the jobs market hiring people was tough anyway. And then they got slammed. And so I do know some of the restaurants that I've been out since we've reopened, they're fully open. And they're warning you that they are not seating all the tables because they don't have staff to serve all the tables.
Many of them are doing that.
Yeah.
And that's smart.
Or they have fewer tables available to seat. Even some of the ones that have really great bars and really great bar service, they're not ready to reopen the bar yet. They can't handle a crowd of 15 random people.
Sure. With a craft cocktail that takes 10 to 12 minutes to make.
And they, while still taking care of 30 tables that have diners with certain expectations.
Well, I'm curious of and I have the numbers here. And you are a man who follows macro trends closely. And you have to do that because he owns a number of businesses.
Closely might be an exaggeration.
Well, you do it. You do it. More so than most, I'll give you that. Non-farm payrolls increased by 559,000 in May. It is slightly below the estimate of 671,000. However, here's the good news. The unemployment rate fell to 5.8%, slightly better than the expected, and below April's 6.1%. So in a nutshell, and I'll get out of your way here, more people getting back to work.
There are more people getting back to work. It's still, the last month's jobs report was sort of dismal. This is still lackluster. I think the word you used beforehand. Lukewarm.
Yeah.
And unemployment for every demographic is still above pre-pandemic levels. So yes, we have people re-entering the workforce, and there are going to be those that their job stalled and it's just open again, and they're happy and they just slide right back in. But if we have that number of jobs that got filled, and you say statistically speaking, there's the 4 people showing up to the 500 job fair, how many of those jobs or positions are open without somebody filling them? Because when we talk about that number you just gave, that's new payroll, new salary.
Right.
So we don't really have a good clue of how much could be there if everybody took the job that was offered.
How about how many of these jobs have been cannibalized by digital, Zoom, virtual, and these innovations?
I have no idea.
You think about that, though?
I don't even know how to begin to track it. I do think what we're seeing is a shift in how people work, and you're seeing a large populace decide what is worth what. If you don't have to commute, if you don't have to have the car, if you don't have to pay for childcare, the kind of job you have is a little bit more flexible than if you have to pay for all those things and you have that margin off the top. I think we've had people in jobs, we were talking about bar managers as an example earlier. We were talking about people that might have jobs where they're 4 and 5 nights a week gone from 3 to midnight.
Right.
Well, they've just had a year to not do that and to have a break that they might have not taken on their own to just evaluate life. But let's suppose they've had a year to just not do that. Maybe that feels pretty good. Maybe they are looking at what the trade-offs are and making a decision about that. And I don't know that any of us know that right now. It is something that we have to let play out and see and move forward. And I'm interested to see even my internal struggle with how to embrace this and not to embrace this with the businesses that we own and that other people run with me. And, agents, all of my agents work from home and from a coffee shop and from the brokerage.
Yeah, from an ISP.
And in other people's houses. They work all over the place.
Yeah.
So for them, I'm not sure it's been that big of a difference now that they've adjusted to
virtual open houses.
Virtual open
like
houses,
that.
which we're seeing real open houses come back.
Yeah.
But, before the pandemic, totally mobile. After the pandemic, even more mobile. So for them, it's just dialing that up. But the people that work in the brokerage, the people that work in our closing company, we have to find that balance between, we're service industries, all of those. We have to find that balance between somebody walking through our door and seeing a happy human and pressures that are on our staff in terms of childcare, in terms of just being able to navigate the world as it exists today, because all the rules either have changed or we don't know what they're going to be.
Nikki Chambliss is watching.
Hey, Nikki.
Nikki, the beautiful, dynamic Nikki Chambliss, the businesswoman. Hello. He said that you and Deandra were going to be super, super impressive, amazing on the show, and you exceeded expectations. Question for you from Kevin Higgins. This is a good question. He says, doesn't the national unemployment appeals and other paperwork impact the 5.8% unemployment rate? Virginia unemployment processing is ranked worst in the country. Do you fellas trust the 5.8%?
I think you have to look at it as less of a hard number and look at the trends. So I get what you're saying, that the unemployment is greater than the number that tracks because the data coming in is a lag because of that delay in the pipeline being tight. We know it's improving. We know it's improving at a good clip. And we know it's probably not as good as we think it is. You have had some of that unemployment number go down because people have left the workforce entirely.
Right.
They have retired. They've stopped seeking a job. And how you capture all of that is almost impossible. It would require magic and crystal balls, and I think in the car I've got live chicken and some salt. You could try it.
And devil's testicles. Yeah.
No, didn't buy those.
Keith Smith, you are watching. He says, yes, there is an international Brussels sprout association. And he also says, happy birthday
Thank
to
you,
my
Keith.
dear friend, Quentin Beckham.
And I hope that you and Yona had a lovely vacation. Some of the things you posted in the pictures I saw, it does look beautiful.
Yeah, it looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, and Keith, we can't wait to see you, pal. You're sincerely missed over here. This is Neil Williamson. We'll get to this comment. Neil Williamson, this is a good one. This is an interesting one on Twitter from Lauren. She says, Jerry, can you ask Quentin if agents picked up during the pandemic? Did we see some of the restaurant folks go to businesses like becoming a realtor? Did it uptick? People joining the association?
I don't know that it upticked, but it didn't slow down. So the pace might not have increased, but most of us went into the pandemic expecting a drop-off of realtors, and that did not happen. Understanding, I think there's 1.4 million realtors. Lee had that number. 1.4 million realtors across the country. Many of them do not sell. So let's remember that. So there's emeritus where they've retired at this point, but they still show up. They've made lots of friends and they want to maintain that connection. There's people like me that work with agents that sell, but do I sell stuff? Probably not in the grand scheme of things. And then you have others that hold licenses that are assistants. So 1.4 is a inflated, broad number. But we still have had more realtors joining the association than anything we planned for. And what we planned was to see people leave. So the short answer to your question is probably. The real answer is I don't know where they all came from, but we continued to see a growth in the number of licensed agents.
Because that's a profession that you can make a very strong argument was one of the best suited or prepared or had a foundation in place to manage COVID. Now, I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, we were all freaking the heck out, but you guys figured it out really quickly.
So I think we always had we've always had the professional track to manage virtual closings, virtual tours, virtual meetings, virtual showings. What we had to learn as we went was how to do it safely for all the clients involved. If you were a family and you had, let's suppose, a medically fragile child, how people saw your house in person, because at some point, you might have 100 people interested, they get details on the house, it goes down to 80, you let everybody see a virtual tour, it drops down to 30, you have 10 of those drop out because they feel like they can't compete. 20 people still need to see the house to know how much they want to fight for it. And so I do think we had to spend some time really combing through guidelines, training, learning, and then making that work for how you let people into houses, how many people could show up, could you bring your whole family, can the seller open all the doors for us so we don't have to touch everything?
Sure.
Items that we could do to make that process work.
Neil Williamson, Free Enterprise Forum, Quentin, deep in the jobs report weeds. Quote, roughly 16.6% of working Americans telecommuted through May because of the pandemic. That's below the 18.3% who did so in April. That stat basically shows people are going back and working in an office.
So a lot of people are returning to an office, and I think the last number I saw in terms of virtual work in the same field, same industry, same job that is new, they're expecting the total when you combine that with stuff that's always been virtual to be somewhere around 20%, one out of 5 jobs. And a lot of that, I think, is going to be a matter of how those businesses operate. One of the things, as I talk about the brokerage, one of the things that I think about, agents do work everywhere, and they're driving around. And if they pass by our brokerage and they think, ooh, I need to stop and print something, and then they walk in and they go, oh, I've got this piece of paper I need to do with person X and this thing with person Y. I'm going to do it while I'm here. And person X isn't there. Their perception of our service drops. I'm not saying they're unkind. This is how the world works. When you walk up to the fast food, if you have a car where you have to get gas, and you walk into the mini mart and there's a line 8 people deep, you kind of sigh.
Yeah.
Because you want to do it before that pump handle clicks.
Sure.
And so I think as business owners and consumers, we're having to balance all of that stuff to make all of this work. And I don't know that we've all figured it out yet.
What's the future of a real estate office? Is the future of the real estate office a tiny spot that you can go in and do some of that admin stuff like the printing and leave? I mean, because you don't need the space to linger anymore, do you?
I don't think the future of a real estate office today is different than it was a year ago.
Okay.
I think it's closer.
Oh.
So the future of a real estate office has always been a smaller space, more shared spaces, more multi-use spaces, classrooms that can be drop spaces or meeting rooms, that sort of thing. And I just think moving virtually the way we have has just accelerated our path towards it. I think a lot of that is really dependent on balancing some of that technology and the consumer wants, just like I said. Apps are great, but when you click to have a question, if you have to wait even 6 or 8 hours to get an answer, most people, if they're really excited, are not going to wait that long. They're going to pick up the phone and start calling. And so the technology has to match that need for us to really embrace virtual at a way that gives the same consumer experience.
Richard Abrusky?
Yes.
Am I saying Richard? Richard, I'm sorry I'm messing up. If I'm messing up here.
Richard's known me for a long time, and it makes me anxious a little bit. That
he's leaving a comment.
Yeah, that makes me nervous.
Another year older and wiser. Happy belated birthday, Quinn.
Thank you, Richard.
Where's he watching?
He is, I don't know where he's at right now, but he's generally in Sacramento area.
Well, Richard, we appreciate that comment. It says Sacramento on his Facebook profile. If you want to wish Quentin a happy birthday, put this in the feed. This is an interesting question. So, do you think this market will continue at its breakneck pace, or do we see any cooling at all on the horizon?
Well, we're seeing some of the number of sales we're adding drop off percentage-wise. We've got new listings coming on, certainly here locally, because we're in the time of year where contracts change and people just have to move. So you have had some new inventory come onto the market at a little bit better pace, but you still have a buyer demand that has not dropped off. I think at some point you have to see the sales drop off because we've burnt through so much inventory in the last year.
There's nothing left.
That the number of houses coming on the market in comparison to what we would expect is just insufficient. I think you've seen some buyers go, ooh, not for me right now. And they've decided to sit it out and let things cool off. And some of those buyers are also sellers. And some of those sellers want to buy in a similar area to where they live right now. They just want to switch up the house. So everything that works in their favor on the sale of their house then works against them when they go to buy, and they've decided to just not enter that fray. So I do think you're going to see this. There's still blood in the water, but it's not the feeding frenzy that it was over the last 8 or 9 months. We're still seeing great prices on houses and great value in houses. And I think what makes me interested in the change of how we work is because if we do shift more dramatically towards work from home, what makes a house valuable changes.
Oh, no doubt.
If you look at searches on Google for things like acreage, searches for acreage in terms of homes was 250% higher in the last 12 months than it was in the 12 months preceding. And so suddenly it wasn't just, I want this great bedroom and this perfectly redone bathroom and a redone kitchen with an open floor plan, which people still want. It's that I want that, and I'm expecting for more of my activities to be at houses, and I want some space around me.
You think the trend's going to continue? I mean, Neil makes the point. It looks like from the stats, people are going back into the office again. I think that's going to continue. It's just a matter of if pre-pandemic that was 85% of everybody, is post-pandemic going to be 78% of everybody? And that 8% can be a big difference in a limited inventory housing market. Sure. Well said. Well said. Keith, the distinguished gentleman's got something for us. He says, if history is an indicator, in the recent housing crash of 2008-9, the drywall carpenter worker took a job at Walmart distribution center or other jobs like that instead of sucking in drywall dust or being outside in the heat and cold. They received full benefits to go to retirement. Why would they go back to working drywall or carpenter or on the job site? He says, I see the same thing happening in the restaurant sector, but what does Quentin think? You've addressed some of that.
Yeah, I think that we've been forced into a place where we had to measure and weigh our options. I hope people have realized they have more options than they think they do. And I'm curious to see what they do with it. I certainly think that you're going to have in-person office jobs that fill. I think you're going to have people that return to the kinds of jobs they had before. You're also going to have people move around. And we just don't know quite where all of that median is going to shift yet.
Johnny Ornalis, thank you for sharing the show. We appreciate and love you. Johnny Ornalis on this program, the owner of El Mariachi in Guadalajara, JPA. Interesting question for you here. Jamie Turner says, another data point for Quentin. Apple released some information regarding their employees going back to office 3 days a week starting in September and 2 weeks a year at the employee's choice, fully remote. So that's a data point that's backing up what you're saying, this hybrid situation. Twitter and some of these tech firms are saying folks can work from home as long as they want, although they are saying they're going to adjust salaries based on cost of living of where you're working from. So Jamie Turner, Orange County's finest, he says another data point from Apple, employees back to office 3 days a week starting in September and 2 weeks a year, fully remote.
So certainly there are jobs that lend themselves to being remote.
Yeah, so many.
So I think of UVA and, space and buildings and the fact that, we're in the actual city of Charlottesville is this really tiny footprint with a border like it was drawn by a drunken blind goat in the middle of a moonless night. But it's small, and we're talking about housing a lot. What if, do medical transcriptionists that listen to recordings and type them in and turn them into what becomes your documented medical record, how many of those exist at UVA? Do they have to come into an office to do that job?
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I think there's jobs that are really, at least, I'm not a medical transcriptionist and I don't run one of those departments. So if you're out there going, you're so wrong, you could totally be right. I'm not an expert.
You were in the medicine field at one time.
I'm picking this out of a hat. I think there are jobs that really lend themselves to work from home. I think that there can be a really big advantage for large companies and institutions to let that happen because so much of our cost is in the building and the electricity and running the stuff. And if our staff can be happier doing the jobs that are easily identifiable as that, totally, let's let it go. The human interaction jobs, I think we're getting people coming back because we're also sick of Zoom. Like after the last pandemic, I'm astonished there's even a dozen people that watch us do this.
Dude, I'm sick of Zoom.
because we've had so many of our interactions have been virtual.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are just tired of it. And they just want to, even the introverts, hi, Nikki, even the introverts are
Nikki, you're an introvert?
She's an introvert.
I would never have guessed that, Nikki.
At least I'm saying you're an introvert. I think you're a social introvert, but you're...
She's watching.
Even introverts are wanting to spend time with friends and family. I think we figured out ways to do portions of that during the pandemic as we established our circles. And so I am curious, like, we're sick of Zoom. Some of the jobs really require a relationship-oriented personal touch. Let's have a face-to-face interaction back and forth. Even when we talk about sitting here, this is so much different than when we had this same conversation on Zoom.
Kathy Ursick.
Urick,
thank you. Thank you for that correction. Kathy Urick says hello, and she's giving you the heart emoji. She says, I hate Zoom. I see the value of it even as I say this, but I hate Zoom. Kathy, we enjoy when you watch the program. Lennox says on Twitter, please highlight in your jobs report discussion women and how they're being marginalized in this new workforce environment post-COVID.
So interesting.
Good point, Lennox.
There's a great article from NPR that I saw out today. So you've got an additional 1 to 2 million women either choosing or unable to return to the workforce and more likely to stay in that position. So if you study differences in gender across employment experiences, women tend to make a choice and stick with it longer. Men tend to be flightier. It's not a big shock.
Yeah.
I embrace that.
That's a perfect example of me. And you.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to play football. Oh, wait. Look. No, I'm going to build birdhouses.
Right.
And you have a lot of, when you look at small businesses that went out of business, there's a disproportionate number of them that were owned by women. You can guess at a lot of reasons for that, but there's a disproportionate number of them that were owned by women. Many of them have not returned. When childcare became an issue, typically it is women that stayed home. Right. Not always, it's not 100%. And I'm not saying it should be one way or the other. And when you have members of family that need caretaking, in the traditional family, the job falls to wives, whether they want it to or not. So I think as we're moving through figuring all this out, we have that group. You have additional demographics if you want to talk about ethnicity. And if you look at the overall employment like pre-pandemic, the number one most employed group, the group with the lowest unemployment rate in
white
the demographics,
male, right?
Asians.
Oh.
Number 2, white. Number 3, Hispanic. Number 4, black. So if
Asians were the most employed.
Had the lowest
Unemployment
rate of any of those.
By
demographics.
race.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Whereas pre-pandemic, the best we got the black unemployment rate down to was a little bit under 6%. So the best black unemployment rate pre-pandemic is the unemployment rate right now. We're saying, gosh, we're ready for this to be better. So all of those people, all of those groups take the hits harder and take longer to recover. And what I don't have sitting in front of me is how that plays out by gender. Certainly, if you look at who goes back to work the fastest, it's white males. You can see it in all the trends. So some of that is based on tradition, some of that's based on family structure, but I think you're going to see a lot more women being forced into choices or looking around them and going, wait a second, screw all of this. I'm going to do this thing now because this works for me, and making it work.
Jonathan says on LinkedIn, Jerry, can you ask your guests about the potential of showing up to work, sitting across or next to your boss, and what that could do for a promotional standpoint?
That's one of the big conversations that we've seen going on.
As this would apply, I mean, how many
So
people
another-
rely on you?
I don't
100 plus, was it?
rely on me.
How many are on the Quentin Beckham supply?
I could have been kidnapped last night, and a lot of stuff is still going to be going on. In fact, I think I dodged it narrowly. But I think
You almost got kidnapped last night?
No, it's a joke.
Okay,
It's
okay.
just teasing. I'm not worth anything. I'm not worth kidnapping. Nobody wants me. So, if you let's assume like the world goes back, and it's a traditional couple, man, wife, 2.5 kids. Childcare is still an issue. Who's probably going to stay home?
I mean, I hate to say this, but
It's probably going to be the wife.
Yeah.
I've never seen your wife here.
Yeah.
I love you dearly.
She's at
I'm
home with our
sure
son.
she's got to have the heart of a saint
She
because
does.
I've spent time with you.
she does.
And
Oh, she's watching.
so let's suppose you were an employee here and Judah was the boss. Secretly, guys, Judah's really the power behind the throne. So
That's true.
So you and your wife both work for Judah. You have childcare. So the assumption in your household is that you're going to come here and sit in front of a mic while your boss observes you. And she's going to stay behind the scenes doing things on social media and electronic marketing.
That's what she does.
So who's Judah more likely to think is valuable and does a great job is the argument. That's the heart of the argument we're getting to. Is it the person you see all the time because you're going to have people in the building that say nice things about you, and that doesn't mean your wife is less nice. In fact, we've all decided she's probably more nice.
She's way more nice. Nicer, I guess.
But you have this in-person marketing advantage
Yeah.
to your boss that the work-from-home person does not.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that's sort of being gone through and processed is women out of the workplace at a disproportionate share, businesses closed, more of them more likely to be pressured into doing all virtual or to choose and want to do all virtual. Does that mean that the job they enter next month that's all virtual is the same job they're going to have a year from now while men doing the same job or people with different options
Going to stay all virtual.
go to the office and do the same job
Right.
and then get promoted because they are seen to do a good job?
Okay, so I'm 100% with you. So in the last 5 minutes, we've learned that the white male is the one that's going to work the fastest right now. And in the last few minutes, we've talked about and it's unfair and it's absolutely sexist, but a lot of the burden of childcare is falling on the shoulders of women, so they are not getting face-to-face in the office. So based on those two statistics or factoids, can we extrapolate that the impact, which is to be seen, that management, upper management, and C-suite is going to be even more dominated by the white male?
God, I hope not.
Because it's pretty damn dominated right now.
I hope not. Because every study says that when you put somebody that looks like me and you let us steer the ship all by ourselves with
You
no other,
hire folks that look like us?
the company just doesn't do as well as if you have a diverse cross-section of people. If a board of directors is gender diverse, that company survives more ups and downturns. It tends to have longer retention for employees and I forget, it's a Harvard Business study that they did, have somewhere in the 10 to 15% range better profits, better revenues. If you take that same board and now you diversify across races and across ethnicities, you get an additional bump on top of that. And if you go through periods of recession, companies that enter recessions that are diverse when they enter it are more likely by about 3 times to still be surviving on this other side. These are larger companies we're talking about.
Today, Quentin.
These are larger companies, not small businesses, which small businesses like people that live paycheck to paycheck, when the economy downturns, they get the brunt of a lot of this. So I am hopeful as we move out that it brings to light some of these issues. Mm-hmm. We're having conversations now about race in the city and across the country that probably nobody would have had 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We are talking more about what it means to have children in childcare. What are schools going to look like, and where are they going to be, and do I have to commute my child, or does he have to get on a bus, and is there a virtual option, or am I virtually forced? These are things that impact how we work and how we live. How we work and how we live impacts the kind of houses we live in and what we build and what they cost. And so I feel like there's so many things up in the air, it is really hard to predict, and it's a really great opportunity for us to redesign our lives so that we're more equitable, that we're more inclusive, and that we're just more realistic about, your job and your income is important. But for most people, it's not number one. It's a means to something else.
Yeah, that mindset is definitely changing. I remember growing up, my brother and I, my parents were entrepreneurs, and my dad was a CPA, small CPA firm, 3-4-man shop. And he worked his tail off.
Yeah.
And he would tell us, you go to college, you work 60 to 70 hours a week until you're 65 or 70, and then you reap the fruits of your labor. And that mindset now, people don't want to do that now. Now it's much more about accumulating experiences as opposed to accumulating wealth. Does that make sense?
It is, and I also think it's about understanding that wealth only goes so far for the vast majority of our country.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean that I'm sure there are people whose entire mindset is to accumulate wealth without any other purpose than to accumulate wealth. They're, what's the duck that rolls around in the money?
Scrooge McDuck?
That's the one. And
spending the gold coins? Yeah.
So I'm sure, we have all sorts of people. Somebody's out there, and more power to them.
Yeah,
you're allowed
we're
to
not
do
knocking
that.
them. Yeah.
No, you're allowed to do that. That's not really how the vast majority of us think. I think being a broker is really hard, and I lay down some nights thinking, God, I did such a bad job today because I needed to help 6 agents, and I only got to 4. And then the minute I hung up with number 3, I realized I could have said something better to them, and so then I tried to call them back. But I want to be a broker because I get to watch and work with and help people like Nikki and Deandra and other Katie and folks that come to us needing and wanting things and helping their lives change and getting to be a part of that and observe it. I like the money I make. It's good money. But after a certain amount, it handles most of my needs. So I think we're reevaluating how all of that works. And I hope that we do a good job of embracing that. Because, again, every other study you read, after a certain level of income, your happiness does not increase.
Right. Carol Thorpe says it's going to be out of sight, out of mind if people don't get back to work, and some do. Out of sight, out of mind. Well said, Carol. Katie Pearl is a Keller Williams agent, right?
She's an amazing Keller Williams agent, yes.
She says, what is so tough is that workplace culture expects men to be less engaged in helping with childcare. My husband is 100% my partner in raising our 4 children, but so much of the childcare during the day falls on me because his workplace would not be open to him sharing in that responsibility. Yeah. He would 100 love to share that responsibility with me, but it's just not an option for him.
Yeah. What we've seen since before the pandemic and really accelerated in the pandemic is culture shifts across a bunch of things. And now we're coming out of the pandemic, and although some things are going to move back towards where they came from, Not everything is, and I'm really interested in the degree to which they do or do not.
Your buddy Neil Williamson, Quentin, from the CNN Business Jobs Report coverage, the labor force participation rate was more or less flat in May at 61.6%, showing that the unemployment rate went down because people found jobs and not only because they dropped out of the workforce. Women accounted for most of the added jobs, with the number of female workers over the age of 20 growing by 381K. He also adds from, is it Axios? Construction employment, however, hasn't followed the housing market forward. The total number of jobs in construction fell in May by 20,000, though the decline was mostly in non-residential jobs. Neil Williamson.
Yeah. And the labor participation rate is a great analog when we talk about unemployment. Some of our unemployment drop is because we have millions of people that were like, yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna do this other thing and sell my homemade clay figurines on the side of the road.
On Etsy. The distinguished gentleman Keith Smith, please ask QB, the benevolent dictator, this question. Over the last 2 weeks, we had dozens of 20 to 30-somethings ask us this question. Should I buy a home in a super hot housing market? Of course, my answer is always, watch Real Talk for the answer. He wants to know, should a 20 or 30-year-old buy a home in a market that's sizzling hot, that's certainly weighted a little more toward the seller than the buyer?
As a general rule, if you are not a homeowner, your life will improve by being a homeowner, regardless of what we're talking about. We don't have $500,000, 1,800 square foot houses on the market that sell without it having an impact on 2-bedroom rental prices. So
wait, explain that again.
You have to live somewhere.
Okay.
Nikki's going to live out of her car. That's her plan B.
Yeah. But Nikki, that was so courageous, impressive what you said. But if she's willing to do that, you see why she's successful. But
for most people, that's plan C or D.
Right. Plan X, Y, Z, Quentin Beckham.
So if there's so much demand for houses that the price is going up, then there's demand for apartments too. Those prices are going up, and we've had this whole conversation with Deandra. What are you doing when you're paying rent? You're throwing money away. So we've talked about some of that. So as a general rule, if you are not a homeowner, moving into home ownership has a lot of opportunity to improve your life, your lifelong wealth, and your kids' ability to access education, your ability to deal with retirement or a severe medical issue. And I want to talk about equity on that note before we finish this.
Sure.
So as a general rule, he's part of Yes Realty Partners. Keith's answer is going to be yes, because all things being equal, if you're not a homeowner, being a homeowner is better.
Well, and on top of that, you're fixing your overhead. And unless it's an adjustable rate mortgage.
You're taking on some maintenance costs. There's things, but the general rule is yes. Mortgage rates are really low. Yes, housing prices are high, but you're still going to pay less over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and be building equity into something that maintains and keeps value. So it's a better answer. Your individual yes or no, you really need to sit down with somebody and somebody who's smart, who's interested in your well-being, and have a really good conversation about your individual yes or no.
Yes Realty Partners. Yes Realty Partners over here. But you say the house is not a commodity, though. You're adamant about that.
I think when you treat your personal home as a commodity, you are setting yourself up for bad things to happen.
Explain that.
There is no reason to treat your personal home as a commodity any more than there is to treat an apartment as a commodity. It's just not possible. You're not going to sign a lease on a $1,200 a month apartment that lets you sublet and then work to sublet it for $1,800 to somebody else and then move on and sign the next lease.
That's a good comparison.
So I don't know why you would do that with your personal home. So all of, when we talk about how that operates, to start thinking of your only home within which you live, raise children, park cars, keep your kayaks, mow the lawn, whatever it is you do, when you start treating that as something that you buy, sell, exposed to risk, all of those potential 5, 10, 15-year family style intergenerational changes and improvements, you put at risk. And I just don't know why you would do that. That does not make sense.
Equity in medicine?
Equity in medicine, education, generational wealth. We're starting to have really good conversations about how Virginia's sort of like the center point on what does it mean to be black in this country? What does it mean to be black in Charlottesville or in the Commonwealth? And a lot of what it means is that your family's intrinsic wealth is significantly less than if you're a white person. And a lot of that has to do with homeownership. I think why we in real estate are central to this conversation, whether we're lenders, FHA, Fannie Mae, the government, realtors, no matter who you are in this, I think you're central to this conversation because a lot of families who were white, that just because of how the country made it easier to be white and own land, you had opportunities for education for your children that then could build on that wealth. You had opportunity to pass on the land and home ownership. You had opportunity to deal with medical crises without going into debt that has a high cost. You just sort of had a safety net that, because of how the laws operated for generations, decades, and hundreds of years prior to me, prior to anybody sitting here, if you were black, you just didn't have access to that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you are black and you make $65,000 a year income, your intrinsic wealth, the money that's sort of setting aside and percolating for all of the things that might come up outside of your monthly bills, is about $14,000. If you are white and you make $24,000 a year, your intrinsic wealth is about $18,000. And so I think one of the things that is an important piece of all of our conversations towards equity, there's a reason why when the job market falls out, if you are in a position where you are Hispanic or black, your unemployment rate jumps up faster and higher and recovers slower. And a lot of that has to do with housing, where you're allowed to live, how the jobs exist in the places you live, and who owned houses for the generation before you and the generation before them and the generation before them.
But how do you fix that? Take this market. How do you fix that in a market like this that is so freaking popular that people are moving to and scooping up the inventory? How do we keep this?
Well, the first thing you do is you have to be honest about it. So the very first thing is we have to agree that, this is a problem.
Okay, we agree. We're talking about it. The next step.
The second thing you have to do is you have to have people that are people in positions of power or influence, whether that's people on Facebook shows, whether it's small business owners or large business owners or elected officials, that recognize that, did I create any of these laws? No. That doesn't absolve me from responsibility.
Okay.
This is my country. This is my community. These are my neighbors and my friends. And I still have a responsibility to try and make forward motion on this. Whether I feel like I was a racist yesterday or I was an anti-racist yesterday, it doesn't matter. I'm still responsible to do it. And so I think step one, be honest. Step two, really kind of accept the fact that we're responsible to be a part of the solution and to work towards it, even when we don't know what it is. And if I think of the number of times in my own life, and I'm probably the low end of the curve, I think people dealing with just the normal routines of moving from childhood to teenagehood to adulthood probably did a much better job than I did. But I can't think of the number of days I woke up not knowing how I was going to make it through the next 72 hours for whatever reason. Like, it just felt overwhelming, and yet here I am. So I don't want us to be afraid of the depth of the problem. It really is huge. I don't know that it's anything that you're going to get a group of people to sit at a table and over the course of 4 weeks be like, oh, here's the plan. We fixed it. Now everybody just has to do that. And I think we have to let go of the idea that more for you means less for me. You know, it's not really one pie. We like to think that, but it's not really one pie. So I think we have an obligation to do this. I think we have a responsibility to do it. And I think there's just really clear history in we, the country, created this issue. And so I think we, the country, have a responsibility to work towards fixing it. Are we going to undo and change everything overnight? Nah, we're not. Your wife's not suddenly going to be at a job while you sit home and take care of the babies. But you've just had the conversation. You know, she might next week be like, you know what? It's your turn, buddy. And if you don't believe me, let me replay this Facebook show you did.
Yeah.
You know, I
I
think
think we had that conversation this morning. Are you talking to my wife? Are you talking to my wife?
Shh. I think we need to make those steps and we have to work towards it. And it's going to take government help because the problem's too big for just individuals to fix the whole problem. We do make those barriers better every day in how we respond, how we act, and what we do.
Michelle Bibb says, Jerry asked Quentin what he thinks UVA's role is in all of this.
Oh, gosh.
Good question, Michelle Bibb.
That's a whole nother show. Because I think when we talk about responsibility, one, I know many, many smart people that are working very, very hard at UVA on this. I think they've developed whole centers around it. They've got professors, and they have done a lot of work in what we call step 1 and step 2 that we just talked about, and being honest about things and starting to just not spin history, but let history be history. Mm-hmm. Let's just look at the facts. I think they've done a really good job in trying to work towards accepting responsibility. And I think that much like our government, they're a very large institution, and turning that ship in ways that are hugely noticeable are going to take some time. But I do think they have a great opportunity to be a force that is positive.
Probably the biggest force.
They're a huge employer. They have
own a ton of land.
They own a ton of land. They have a huge impact on housing. And I know that they are participating in plans with Seville and the surrounding areas as to how to make that better.
Michelle Bibb follows with this. One way they can start is by asking more of the underclassmen, I'm talking second and third years, to live on grounds and not housing that could go to us in the workforce that are just trying to pay our rent and meet our bills.
I don't disagree. I don't know that it's as simple as making that decision. There's a lot of things over time. One, I'm not an expert in all the interplays between UVA and how its
Keith
operations
is watching.
work.
He says, a week from today, Sean Tubbs and Neil Williamson will tackle this exact subject.
Yep. And they are much smarter about this. And so, Michelle, tune in a week from today and ask them questions. You'll get better, more informed answers. But there's also Seville Plans Together. You have an opportunity to participate in these processes. UVA is inviting community members to participate. And I do think we didn't get here in one decision. We got here in 1,000 decisions and hundreds of years. We're not going to escape this in a single decision in a single meeting, but we need to be honest, we need to be responsible, and we need to take the steps that we can take, whether they are run, walk, or crawl style steps.
Do you think even asking the second years to live on grounds would have a big impact in Charlottesville?
Would
that be an extra 3,000 beds available to locals?
The majority of rentals are not students in the city.
The majority of rentals in the city of Charlottesville are not UVA students.
The last time I looked it up, and this is old and from my memory, which is even older today than it was yesterday.
Literally.
Yeah. The last time I looked, it was 23% of rentals.
Really?
Were student.
So
now,
25, roughly a quarter?
Now, what it doesn't count is houses that are owned by families.
By the parents that are renting to students. Their kids.
That are housing 4 or 5 kids. And there's really good arguments on both sides of the coin about how that does have a better impact in total for the community.
How so?
Because you've now taken a group of kids that would probably occupy more total square footage in separate rental units.
Understood.
And you've grouped them into a place.
Aggregated them, yeah, with their friends under a roof. Yeah.
So there's arguments both ways. And
What's the con?
what's the con?
Yeah, the con argument.
You could have a local family living in that house.
Right.
I mean, that's always going to be the con. I don't know that it's as simple as that. And so I think we do need these folks coming together, having those conversations. And I really think you should ask Neil, Michelle, ask Neil next week, because he knows so much more about this than I do.
A week from Friday, Michelle. These were good questions that got us thinking. How many, this is just spitballing, how many of the rentals in the city are owned by major corporations?
No idea.
Because I would think
I think you have to separate large apartment complexes out when we say that.
Okay. So you're saying like an Eagles Landing?
Eagles Landing,
Oxford Hills,
City Walk, you
yeah.
know, there's rental houses. There's Deandra and Nikki style
Yeah.
landlords, and then there's corporations.
Right.
And what we saw in the housing crash is that a lot of rentals became owned by larger corporations. You know, it really
'Cause they had the burn rate.
It shrunk the small landlord population.
Yeah.
We're pushing back against that, and we'll see how that goes post-pandemic.
We will see how that goes. Neil Williamson is ready for Friday. He's going to be there with Sean Tubbs. I see that they are watching. Keith Smith has put a UVA roundtable together on Real Talk. So what do you think? We're in the summer here. We're in June. I can't believe I'm saying this. We have 6 months and change left of 2021, which is shocking. How do you see the rest of the 6 and change playing out?
I think we have an opportunity to do some really amazing things. You know, for a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of programs, the pandemic came and it just shattered their world, and it just broke apart everything that they depended on. And the one advantage to that as a community is, as we walk forward, we only have to pick up the pieces we like. And so I think in the midst of this, we need to do some sifting. As we are ramping back up to whatever our new economy is going to be, I think we need to do some sorting as we decide what was valuable and what was fair sometimes, and let's build a better jar as we move forward, or do something better, because it's been busted, a lot of it hasn't, but a lot of it's been busted, and this gives us opportunity for great change.
Nancy Farrell. Sorry, Nancy, I'm going to mess up your last name. Nancy Farrell, she says, you talk about equity in housing. We got to figure out a way to keep gentrification from happening. You have vulnerable neighborhoods that are literally changing because the locals can't afford to pay their taxes. And then I see some of these homes trading for well over what they're worth. That is only going to cause our assessments to go up as well, and I live on a fixed income.
I don't disagree. Again, I think the problem's larger than a single sentence. Part of why, if you talk to myself, if you talk to Rachel Burns, part of our love for AHIP is helping keep families in generational homes when they're on fixed incomes and they can't afford the upgrades and the repairs, or they can't install an air conditioning unit or a heat pump that cuts their electric bill in half. AHIP steps in and does a lot of that so that people can stay in the homes they stay in. And then there's other folks that they do get pushed out for one reason or another, and those reasons vary from taxes to personal crises to trees falling through roofs and an inability to repair it.
Nancy follows with this. Jerry, could you ask Quentin how a home down the road selling for top dollar can impact our whole street?
Oh gosh, no, I don't know, because it depends on the street, and It depends on the homes, and it depends on their similarities. We want home values to climb. We want them to climb at the same time inventory does. And so our mismatch here is not, the mismatch isn't just the home value. The bigger part of that equation is the inventory. And so we can talk about home values a lot, and it's not untrue. But until we start addressing inventory, we're going to be in a market where prices are not cheap.
She follows. Thank you, Nancy. I live in the city of Charlottesville off Ridge, and every time one of these homes sells for top dollar, all of us that have been on Ridge for a long time cringe. I feel that.
I totally feel that.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're on a fixed income,
Yeah.
changes in taxes and changes in what goes on in your neighborhood can affect you.
It's such a fine line because you want, as you said, the home, which is most of us' top asset in our portfolio. A lot of folks' retirement is tied to eventually selling their home, right? And then enjoying the equity that they have. So you want the home to increase in value, but some of these prices are just astronomical.
I think the prices are crazy.
Yeah.
I also think that whether we like it or not, we are subject to all the laws of supply and demand.
Right.
As anything else.
Sure. Just look at gasoline.
And I think we have to keep having these conversations, even though there's no simple solutions.
Well, I enjoyed the conversations with you very much.
Thank you.
Weekend plans? It's the month of Quentin.
It is the month of Quentin. So the weekend plans involve a lot of work that I need to get caught up, including some for a lovely lady, Lee Beaver, that lives here in Virginia.
Okay.
There's a gathering tonight
For you?
for me and others.
At the barn?
That is correct.
Yeah.
There is.
Is it weird that I knew that about you? It's
I
just
just
you love the barn.
It's easy to. I'm an easy read. Tomorrow we're having a picnic barbecue family outing for the entire brokerage, handing out production awards.
Is this your fabulous assistant help coordinating this?
Steven,
Yeah, you said he kills it at this stuff.
when you say help coordinating, what
He
we
ran
really
everything?
mean is he took care of it all. We got about 140 people, kids, whole families, agents coming. I'm really excited about that.
Where's that?
That is at a park here in town.
Very nice.
So outdoors, we were planning it during COVID.
Sure.
We're trying to make it more comfortable, but we're really looking forward to that. And then Sunday, I have a friend to see, and again, this work that I really need to get done.
So Rachel Byrne's sighting tonight, huh?
Yes,
At the barn.
yes.
Because it's not a party at the barn without Rachel there.
She has a strong claim to that.
Was she a bartender and server there at one time?
I believe that she was a child there while her dad played music
Oh, really? Pat?
in the barn. Yeah.
I'm a big Rachel Burns fan. Please someone tag Rachel if she's not watching. I think we both are huge Rachel Burns fans.
I love Rachel.
My friend, this has been a magical 4 shows. The most fun one was the one with Lee and Elena, and you and I were two truths and a dare. My most favorite, however, was the round table with Nikki and Deandra.
I love that show.
And he put a show together that shows anyone, if they put their mind to it, can be a landlord without needing deep pockets. And I enjoyed that roundtable so much, we're welcoming Deandra back to the show. In fact, you should come that day.
You have to invite me.
You're so freaking busy. Well, I'm going to send you the details before I forget. I would love to have you for that roundtable as well. Would you do that if you have the schedule available?
If I can make it work, yes.
You can make it work. Okay. Well, guys, that's the show. He's Quentin Beckham. This program is presented by Yes Realty Partners and the Yes Team Realtors, 2 trusted brands and names in the game. Quentin Beckham, the current president of CAR, and Kathleen Matthews says Deandra is amazing. She is amazing.
She is amazing.
Like, she was so amazingly dynamic. I was like inspired by her. We will see you guys on Tuesday with Real Talk with Keith Smith back in the seat, fresh from the islands. He's going to be sun-kissed.
Yes.
Fresh from the islands, Keith and Jonas Smith. We are grateful for you watching. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, we can archive them. And Ms. Bibb, I would encourage you to watch the show a week from Friday for those University of Virginia questions, which we will tackle with Neil Williamson and Sean Tubbs. Thank you for joining us this Friday morning. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
So hard to